you've got to know what the traffic's like behind you. Now, like if there's a lot of boats close, you've got to be really careful what your course is afterwards. You know, there might be some boats in front of you that have sort of run down here, whatever. But what I saw a lot of the time, especially offshore, because it was hard to get spinnakers full there, skippers with their heads down in the boat pulling strings and the boat just running square. Of course you can't get the spinnaker up if you're running square in light air. And so that was a problem. The spinnakers weren't setting. And somebody'd come around here and sail the right angle and pop his spinnaker on, just come straight over the top of you. And once one boat sails over the top of you, generally the next 3 or 4 will sail over the top of you because you just got gassed. Okay, so if it's windy, the same thing happens. If it's windy, the golden rule is to try and stay on the bear away jibe long enough for the fleet that's in front of you to start jibing away. Because if you've got boats, boats behind you like this, and you jibe and come down here, you end up getting gassed by all these boats here. And if there's a distance mark here and the boats are reaching across here, there's a big area here of no wind. So if you jibe at the mark, it's pretty disastrous as well. So if you've got a jibe to get to the leeward mark, it's better to hang out in the bear away side, and sometimes you even have to sail a little bit hotter than you'd want to, but you just got to stay there and hack it down there, because that's where the clear air is. And once it starts to open up, then jibe and go across and try and pick some shifts. The other thing is picking shifts downwind is much more difficult than picking them upwind, because upwind you're going into them, so you see more shifts. When you're going downwind, you see less of them because you're going with them. So, your heading that you're sailing and where the mark is really important. Like if you're sailing a good steady heading out here and all of a sudden you lift, you've got to be thinking we should be on the other jibe unless you've lifted because it's light air.
But it's just in a really big fleet, like at the Worlds and things like this, what was often happening, you come around the mark and then everybody's reaching out,
Yeah.
getting their air clean. And quite often you find that somebody just take the punt, jibe in the low, somehow make up a huge...
Sometimes if you've got a gap behind you, like if you've got a gap to the next boat and you can jibe and get down here before you get run over, this quite often works. But I've watched like hundreds of, like elite racing regattas, grade 1 events. And I've watched them with a lot of good sailors, like the Stars, for instance, when I was coaching Bisho. He could run deeper than anybody in the fleet because he had good technique. And they used to come round and they'd start running deep and then they'd get low and then they'd jibe. And the guys that used to run down here, hotter, but, because they didn't have such good tech, but just kept their air clear until it broke up a bit and jibed, sometimes one jibe to the bottom mark, they'd come out like 8, 9 boats in front of them, invariably. And the lasers, the same. And the other trouble is when you get down in here, the water is rough like hell. Like you get stern waves and bow waves off all the other boats, and it's really hard to keep your air clear. So if you do jibe and get down here, then you've got to really watch behind, because sometimes you end up with boats, boats form a wall like this, and they tend to get in straight lines because they all run up to each other And if you're not looking at this and going, let's move over here a bit, or let's move down here, jibe and move over here into some clear air, and sometimes there's gaps between the boats, like sometimes I go down to the bottom of the course and look back up, and whoever I'm coaching, you're looking at where he is and who's behind him. And sometimes it's just be like sailing in the lee of Sydney. You've got 10 or 15 boats in a wall behind them. And the guys that are out on the edges are running in much better pressure and getting down there. So, and I watched a couple of the guys, GT was one, he had somebody standing at the mast looking backwards nearly all the time in the harbour on the runs. And, just looking at pressure and stuff. And he ran pretty well generally. So there's a few of these things that you want to sort of get them into, like golden rules. Like think ahead with your tactics. If you're sailing in a big stack of boats like this and you're over here, you've got to be saying, what's going to happen when these boats tack? Because you need to know whether they're going to cross you or not. And if they do tack, right, you instantly look at them and say, they're crossing us. Now what do we want to do? Do we want to tack away, or do we want to take their sterns? Where's the rest of the fleet? That sort of thing. If you don't know where all the boats are, that are in your area that you're racing with, then you can't make good tactical decisions. A lot of people, if the boats down here tack and they don't see them until the last minute, and they go, oh, they're crossing us. And they haven't pre-made good tactical decisions. And the decision making when you get to this part of the course, like up here, where getting to the ley line or keeping going and coming in on port tack, that sort of thing, when those decisions are made, that's still really critical to know where all the boats are, because if there's a bunch of boats coming across here and you're coming in here and you're on starboard and you're yelling starboard at them and they all duck you as you go past, what's going to happen up here? Yeah, you're going to be in deep trouble unless what sort of a day is it? It's shifty. I'm sailing a really high, good angle now, and by the time I sail from here to here, there's a high probability I'm going to get a left-hander and I'll come in and I'll be in front of those guys. If that's the case, it's worth doing, because you can be a lot better off but no worse off. So if this is not the case, if you're sailing sort of a low angle, you tack here and be first to the ley line and tack onto starboard and catch them on starboard on the ley line, where then they'd have to dip you or possibly miss making the mark if you pick your ley line well. So the decisions around this area here are like super magnified because of the closeness to the boats. As they get to here, they get closer and closer together. And some of those worlds off Sydney, particularly the Nationals, I think, that were up off Pittwater, there was half the fleet on the tacked over on the port ley line, and half of them on the starboard ley line, and they were stacked up like this, and the same coming in here. Stacked up like this, and just sitting up here watching it, you're going, whoa, what's going to happen? And the smallest of shifts, one side would be in front and the other side would be in front. But in reality, there's only these three boats we're ever going to get round. before the starboard tackers just attack the whole thing. So that's what happened. Like the 3 leading boats out of the left-hand side were around, and then the massive starboard tack boats there, and there's guys ducking, and and some of the guys that were looking in really good shape ended up like 15 or 20 because the wall was so heavy. So you've got to start thinking about that down here, and you've got to be looking at, we're going out here, how many boats are on the crosswind line? Hundreds of them, So if they're all level, that's different than if you're here and half of them are back here like this, not on the crosswind line. You can cross them whenever. There might be 3 or 4 over here on the crosswind line. Well, you say, okay, when we come in on port tack, there's only 3 or 4 boats going to be in contention there. So you can afford to go to the port lay line. But if there's a heap of them there, then you've got to say, perhaps we've got to try and get there earlier onto the starboard lay line and let these guys go out the left and sail longer over here in clear air on the out on the lay line. So that sort of strategic, it's strategy really that's meshed in with your tactical thing. And if your strategy is to try and get to the left, and you go, okay, we're going to duck 1 boat here and get out there, that's a good strategy. But if you strike 2 more boats over here, then it's a tactical decision. Do you tack under them and lee-bow them and force them off, and then tack and go back to the lay line? Or what do? Do we duck them? Are there any other boats there? Because ducking 1 boat's fine, and if the boats are on the crosswind line, ducking them's not difficult because you're doing a gate start. But if each one's a little bit digressed like this, all of a sudden you start making massive losses in the dipping. So there's a lot of stuff to think about here, and it's a reason why the guys who train a lot with their trim, their speed and their steering and everything, they're on automatic. They're in automatic mode, so they have all their brain power to work with this sort of stuff. And sailing is, people say to kids and adults, you should concentrate more. And the first thing you say is, what on? Because there's a million things to concentrate on. There's the trim of the boat speed, are we pointing, are we doing this, we're doing that, where are all the other boats, all this stuff. So sailing is a focus thing. And you need to be focused in the right area at the right time. Like you need broad focus to pick up what's happening in the fleet, and if you've got a crew, then perhaps some guys are good at that. And you say, okay, that's your job to do that. And somebody who's a good trimmer, you're in charge of the boat speed. So I'm steering, and I say, the boat feels a bit crappy, try this, try that. And my focus has gone on to that for a second. I know it's going to get fixed. I go back into looking at the sea, feeling the boat, which is what the steerer should be doing, and not worrying about a whole bunch of things that are not his problem. And whoever's who's doing the overall scene thing, he should be feeding information to the helmsman, so that the helmsman has a picture of what's around him. So when he looks over his shoulder, thinks, oh, we've got a bit of a header, we should tack. He looks over his shoulder, he knows what he's going to see. He doesn't have to look for 5 minutes to make up his mind, because he's got a good clear picture in his head of what's happening. So use your crew in that mode. Like, get the guys, if there's a guy who's good at numbers, put him in charge of the compass and keeping track of the headings and stuff. That sort of thing. So you focus. A lot of people, when they're struggling with speed, they get their focus stuck in the boat. And you hear people say, get your head out of the boat. That's fine if you're going fast. But you should be able to be focused on your speed and fix it quickly. And this is why your telltales and stuff on your sails are quite important that they work accurately, because you can look around the rig and go, well, all the telltales are working on the main and it's too flat. They should be, a bit turbulent on the windward side because we're under power or something. So then the fine trim on your boat. I was looking at, watching boats quite carefully, and at sail into pressure, no trim. Sail into down pressure, no trim. Because I can see the leach of the main. Like when you change the fine tune a little bit, I can see the leach of the main move. Now, when you sail into, when you're not all sitting on the side, and you haven't reached max angle of heel yet, you're still sitting up here. When you feel pressure, it blows the leach of your mainsail open, and you should trim on, because you should be keeping your twist profile. Like if this is your twist profile here, and you get a gust, and it goes out to there, what's it done? Yeah, it's depowered. So you're not using the extra pressure. So your fine tune, your guy with the fine tune in his hand, should be trimming on and keeping the leach up, at its max angle of attack. And then when he pulls it, he's got to know that he pulled this much, because when you hit a soft spot in another 30 seconds, he knows he gives it that much back. You don't have to keep looking at the sail even. You can do it when you're steering. You just have to know that it comes on, and that much pressure, you feel it on your face, the pressure go up. I'm driving the powerboat behind you guys. I got my head in the air. I feel pressure go up, and nobody's moved. The body weight hasn't moved, and the trim hasn't moved.
So, Mike, what sort of wind strength is this example you're giving?
Oh, in anything under max angle of heel. When you say what is strong wind is when you reach max angle of heel and you've got your crew sitting out maximum. Because after that, if you get increased pressure, you've got to depower. Right? So when you're in this mode, they're not fully out. There might be somebody in the boat even. When you get up pressure, you trim on to use the power that's come to you. And this is where it's crazy. Like when you're on max angle of heel, the automatic reaction to up pressure is to ease. So it's exactly the opposite. All right. So, and this is what's not happening, and the fine tune is one of the most powerful things in your boat, because you're easing the leach out and bringing it back in again when it's stronger wind, and it depowers the head of the sail, which is your maximum heeling power, is up high. If you drop a traveller, which you don't really do in a etchel, but you drop the traveller, it just opens the sail like a barn door. It doesn't change the height of the heeling, the major force that's acting on your rig. It doesn't change the height of it, it stays the same. But if you twist the sail, this drops. And as soon as it drops, you can make it bigger. Side force can be bigger, because the thing that heels the boat over is the force by the height above you, or wherever. It's this distance multiplied by the height. So if you've got the extra height, then you've got to have less force, otherwise the boat doesn't maintain its angle of heel, which is critical. Because you get it pressed a little bit, drag goes up. What happens when the drag goes up to the boat speed? Yeah, boat speed slows. So So that fine-tuned trim, like I reckon, once you set a depth up, like your main power comes from depth. So once you set your backstay up, and if it's like 10, 12 knots or something, you've got the foot pulled out, you've got a bit of backstay on, you've got a really nice depth there, and the boat's sailing really nicely, and you can handle the up-down pressure just with the fine tune. But then you find the fine tune's out a lot all the time. So then change the depth. Reduce your power source. It's got a collapsing feel in that. Ooh. Change the depth to a new gear, and then fine trim it again with the fine tune. People are not doing that well enough. They're sitting there watching the mainsail backwind and not changing the depths accurately and playing with the twist of the mainsail enough. I mean, if you sail in a dinghy, you're doing it all the time. It's just a thing. You're sailing with the main sheet in your hand and you're steering. But an Etchel's a dinghy. Like all boats are dinghies, and they need to be trimmed in the same way. So they're the areas I think that you can make big steps forward, is in the fine trim, in up-down pressure. Now, we had one race. What sort of a day is it? The breeze was gradient northerly, and it was blowing straight down the harbour. There were hardly any shifts, and the breeze had been trying to get to the east a bit because it was warm. And in Sydney, when you get gradient breeze and it heats up, you get thermal effect on it, and it tries to pull it round to the sea breeze direction. It's the same when you get an easterly and it's gradient east, but it starts to get hot. It tries to pull it left into the northeast direction. So depending on how strong the gradient is and how strong the heat is, depends how far it goes. And when it's pulling it in from the east to the northeast, as the day goes on, generally it's going to go back to the east. Or if something changes, it'll go back to the east because the thermal is not as strong as the gradient. And that day it was a north gradient, and it had been trying to get to the east, and because we were sailing really late in the day, it started to cool down, and it went straight back to the north. Remember that? And then it was just like, I didn't think it had happened that quickly. And I thought the East Shore might pay the first time, but the guys went over there got killed because the guys that went to Bradley's, there was incoming tide as well, they got the tide benefit, but they also got the shift around the corner, just made out like bandits. And that was the ball game for that day. Like, you couldn't go anywhere else for the rest of the day, but left the Bradleys, and everybody that tried to do something else made losses. You guys had a go up the roundabout, and you did some really good work with some small shifts and stuff like that, and probably closed the gap a bit. But when you looked at the placings at the end of the day, there's hardly any changes at all, except downwind. So that's one of those days where, there's really nothing to do. But I always think, trying to get a handle on what sort of a day is it, whether it is a sea breeze or whether it's a gradient that's going to get pulled one way or the other by thermal activity, it's worth having that knowledge. And Sydney Harbour with the Bradley's shore coming down like this, and the nor'easter coming in this way, sort of comes down and it does this. And this is why you've got left coming out of Bradley's Head. And if you watch a lot of the guys, if they're racing the marks up here, they'll set and come over and run down this shore. Because there's better pressure down here. It's sort of been like that for 50 years. So there's a lot of local knowledge around the harbour that, you know, that you need to, and racing into Rose Bay, you know, Steel Point and Rose Bay sort of goes round like this, and Shark Island's over here. Like the southerly comes in and does this, like this. So when you come into Rose Bay, if you come in from here, you get a lift across here, and when you get over here, you're getting the more southerly coming across the golf course, and you get lifted back out of here. And quite often, you know, you can get some big headers here, and you can make gains by using them. But if you get sucked over here, you get caught over here, and it's really hard to get back. I saw Dougie McGain got stuck over there one day and really suffered trying to get back. So that's about it, I think. But there's a lot, as somebody said to me once, there's a lot to think about. Yeah.
It's a question on Bradley's Head you talked about a minute ago. With that big running tide we had there, you reckon there's a back eddy on the north side? Like a
No, forget about all that stuff. It's all too hard. Like we did a massive check. We did a massive check of currents in the harbour when the Olympics were here, and so did everybody else in the world. And if that's the head, south head's here, that was the strongest current on the run out, was around there, and the other strong one was round Bradley's, where it comes down under the harbour bridge. Oh, yeah, and goes out down the main channel. And because the Pigs is here, there's quite a dead spot down the middle, and the tide's also in the western channel, but it's not as strong as, I mean, the eastern channel, but it's not as strong as the western channel. So this is the most. But I don't think we got any more than like 0.5 of a knot. We were getting like 0.7s or something around here when it was full big tides. But everybody thinks there's more tide than the harbour than there is. So when you get in like 10-degree shifts and stuff like that, it's by far much more important than the current. But when it's you know, like a straight day, like a northeast day where there's only one way to go, then, you know, like a boat length a minute or something is important, quite important. And, you know, when we check the tides when we're sailing overseas for our athletes, I always give it to them in boat lengths a minute, because that's sort of what you've got to be thinking about. Like, if you've got current running this way and you're working up here and the mark's over here, you've got to go, well, I've got to go, that leg's going to take me 3 minutes. The boat length a minute, I've got to go, you know, I can go 3 boat lengths over the ley line and still get in there. But if I tack here and I get out here into the stronger current and I've got to try and work back to the mark, well, it's pretty disastrous. But so you've got to be thinking all the time, are the shifts more important than the current? And what sort of a day is it then is important. Is it a really shifty day or is it a straight day? Any other questions? Well, I look forward to seeing you when I cruise around the harbour. I'll keep an eye on you lot, you know. It was a pretty big improvement from the start to the finish, trim-wise, and the starting got better. Lots of stuff got better.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
We are going to plan a few other sessions, maybe something on rules, something on actually setting up boats. So these are something we're going to have in the coming months. I think it's been fantastic to have Fletch tonight. None of us, you know, there would be nobody that hasn't gained a hell of a lot from the whole exercise. So I think it's been terrific. Thanks again, Mike. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, it's been good fun to do.